they don't have a goalie, and the goalie they have is like mid. So
and you're hired.
Ella, yeah.
Oh.
We remember a few things. So, for instance, how do we write this in exponential form?
What do you mean exponential form? Oh, I got it. I got you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so it's 5 and 2 over 3.
Good.
In the exponent form, yeah.
Good. Excellent.
That's perfect.
Okay, how do we write this in radical form? Ew.
You want to help you? I'll help you.
Look at those.
Let me do it again.
No. Just give other people a chance. Let's do 3 to the 5 fourths. Let's call on Anya. What is that in radical form?
So you put the 3 in the square root, and then put the 4 on the outside, and then you put it in. No, you put the 5 on the 3.
Yes, very good. Excellent. Good job. Okay, how about this one? Let's do, yes, ma'am?
I have a question about that one. So wouldn't it also be the same if you put the 5, like you put the 3 in the parentheses and then you put the 5 on the outside?
No.
Like, didn't we do that?
What are you talking about? Like this?
Like you just did a, no, like the
Oh, like
whole thing in
parentheses?
And then you put the 5 on the outside.
Good question. Let's see. Is that the same?
Yes, it is.
So how would I rewrite this? This would be 3 to the 1/4, right?
Yeah.
Times 5. And then what do we do when we have exponents outside the
You
parentheses?
multiply it.
Multiply them. So yes, that would be the same.
Yeah,
Good
so I did
job.
on one assignment.
Very good.
I was thinking.
Okay.
I would keep it.
So if we have 10x squared minus 6 equals 164. Let's solve for x. Add the 6. Good. Okay, divide by 10.
17.
Take the square root of both sides. And don't forget plus or minus.
Just let us have this quiz.
Take your time before you hand stuff in.
You know, that doesn't bring up.
I bet you'll never do that again.
But I would.
Okay. How about this one? Take the square root of both sides. So can we simplify that anymore? Say 2 times 23, and that's not going to do anything.
It's the answer.
So that's it.
Yeah.
Okay? Okay. So we're going to move on, and we're going to start talking about imaginary numbers.
Hey, yo. That's creepy.
Okay, we're going to have a quiz Friday on the stuff that you did for homework last night. Okay, what we did in class, solving the square root equations and the exponents. Friday.
We don't have it Friday. Thursday.
Yeah, you have it Thursday.
Thursday, thank you. It's the second period. Thursday, yes. Okay.
Okay.
So now we're going to talk about what we call imaginary numbers. Okay, because sometimes when we're solving an equation, like for instance, x squared plus 7 equals
X squared plus
3. Okay, so what would we do to solve that?
minus 10. Minus 7, my bad.
Minus 7. Okay, so we get x squared. What's 3 minus 7?
Negative 4.
Okay. So now we take the square root of both sides and we get x equals plus or minus the square root of negative 4. So what do you think about that?
You can't do that.
Can't do it in the real number system.
Yeah.
But we can see that it actually happens. So we use what we call imaginary numbers. So an imaginary number is an I, and we usually write it with a little curve on it just so that it's clear that it's an I instead of a 1, right? That can be confusing sometimes. Okay, so we put a little tail on the I. Okay, I is equal to the square root of negative 1. I is an imaginary number, and it's equal to the square root of negative 1. So we're going to come back to this example over here in a little bit. Let's just talk about I for now. I squared. Well, I squared is I times I, right? Does everybody agree with that?
Yes.
Okay. Well, what does I equal? The square root of negative 1. Okay. Everybody following me? Well, when I take the square root and multiply it times the square root, what happens? Like, what's the square root of 3 times the square root of 3? 3. Yeah, the square root just drops out. So this is equal to, instead of square root times the square root, what's it equal? Negative 1. So I squared is equal to negative 1. We have I equal to the square root of negative 1. I squared is equal to negative 1.
It equals positive because it's negative 1 comes down.
No, because what happens, right, let's just look at this. We end up with the square root of negative 1 times negative 1. And what are we looking for when we take square roots? Pairs. We're looking for pairs. When we have a pair, we take them out. So we take that pair of negative 1s out, and it just equals negative 1.
Yeah, I get it.
Okay? Okay, so let's look at I to the third power. So I can rewrite I to the third as I times I squared. Just like x times x squared is equal to x to the third, I times I squared is equal to I to the third. Well, what did we say I was equal to? Square root of negative 1. Actually, I'm going to leave it as I. I'm sorry, because it makes it less confusing. Leave it as I. What's I squared equal to? Negative 1. What's negative 1 times I? Negative I. I to the third is equal to negative I.
Wait, can you start over? Don't be, because I'm confused.
Okay, well, all we did was substitute negative 1 for the I squared. And that gives us negative I. I times negative 1 is negative I.
It's imaginary numbers, so it's got to be more.
Okay, I to the fourth. Let's do I to the fourth. I'm going to rewrite that as I squared times I squared. What's I squared equal to? Negative 1. So we have negative 1 times negative 1. What does that equal? 1. I to the fourth is equal to 1. Okay.
This is no. This is no. I think
Okay.
you use X.
So what we have this pattern. We're going to have
Use X.
I squared, I to the third, I to the fourth, right? So we're going to leave this as I squared is negative 1. I to the third is negative I to the fourth is positive 1. This pattern is going to repeat itself. This pattern of I, negative 1, negative I, 1. It's going to repeat itself. So I to the fifth, I to the sixth, I to the seventh, I to the eighth. Without going through the whole thing, we're going to just look at the pattern. This is I. What do you think I to the sixth will be? Negative 1. I to the seventh is negative I to the eighth is 1. See, I, negative 1, negative I, 1. I, negative 1, negative I, 1. What do you think I to the ninth will be? I to the 10th. I to the 11th. I to the 12th. Okay. It's going to keep repeating itself every 4 numbers. Okay. So all you have to memorize are these. Because after that, for instance, let's say I want I to the 7th. All I'm going to do is say 7 divided by 4. How many times does 7 go into 4? Once, with a remainder of 3. It's this remainder that we care about. I to the 7th is the same thing as I to the 3rd, which is negative I. Okay. Let's look at I to the 35th. We don't want to list them like this and keep repeating it every 4. So we're going to say 35 divided by 4. Okay, how many times does 4 go into 35? 7 times 4 is 28. 8 times 4 is 32. So 8 with a remainder of 3. So I to the 35 is the same thing as I to the 3rd. All we care about is the remainder. And I to the 3rd is negative I. Okay. How about I to the 49? Okay. 49 divided by 4 is equal to,
Why do we have to do 4?
because it repeats every 4 times. 12 with the remainder of, 12 times 4 is 48, so what's the remainder? 1. So I to the 49 is the same as I to the 1st, which is just I. I to the 49 is equal to I. Ay.
That's too much work.
Ay.
Too much work. It's just annoying.
It is annoying, that's true. I'll give you that. It's just the remainder. That's all we have to remember, the remainder. Okay? How about I to the 122?
122. So divided by 4.
Good. 122 divided by 4. So what's that going to be?
12. So it's right at 2.
30. 4 times 30 is 120 with a remainder of 2. So I to the 122 is the same as I to the 2nd, which is equal to negative 1. I to the 122 is equal to negative 1.
Oh.
What do you think?
Yeah.
Can I have a homework sheet?
I do not have one yet
Oh my gosh.
because we're not finished with this. Okay, I'm going to give you like 3 of them to do yourself, okay?
Okay.
So let's do I to the 66, I to the 13, and I to the 35. What do we have to do in order to figure this out? Divide by 4. So 66 divided by 4 is 16 with a remainder of 2. So this is the same thing as I squared, which equals -1. Okay?
Wait,
Yes.
how did the remainder? Whenever I put 66 divided by 4, it gives me like 16.5.
Okay, so good question, right? So how do you do that? So we do 66 divided by 4, right? So we get, 66 divided by 4. We get the whole number, 16, right? So now what we have to do is we take that 16 times 4 is 64. So now I know my remainder is 2. So you take the whole number and you multiply it by the 4. That's it. It's 64, so my remainder must have been 2. Okay? So 13. So 13 divided by 4 is 3. Right? 3 times 4 is 12. Right? I'll do it on the calculator. Right? 13 divided by 4. That gives me 3.25. So now I have to figure out 3 times 4 was 12. So that means the 0.25 represents a remainder of 1.
Oh yeah, it's
Okay?
if it's 25, 0.25 is 1. If it's 0.50, it's 2.
Yes.
0.75.
Okay, so remainder of 1. So this is going to be equivalent to I to the first, or just plain old I. Okay? 35. 35 divided by 4 is 8. Whoops. Divided by 4 is 8. Okay, I'll show you on your calculator again. 35 divided by 4 is 8. So now I'm going to do 8 times 4 is 32. That means I had a remainder of 3. Yes, pro question.
So really, you don't have to do like the whole number that you get and then times the 4, because it says 25, 15, 75, so it always be 1.
That's just with 4.
Yes.
I have one more.
Okay, so I to the third. What does I to the third equal? Negative I. Okay, you do have to memorize these in the green box here. You have to memorize these. Okay?
Did everyone just go, oh?
No, I said negative I.
All right, so you have to memorize
I could
those.
have sworn something.
Okay.
Like, oh.
Okay, let's go back. Let's look at that equation that we were working with. Okay. Oh, why am I doing it? X squared plus 7 equals 3. Let me just rewrite it down here. Okay. X squared plus 7 equals 3. So if we subtract 7 from both sides, we got x squared equals -4. Okay. And then we're taking the square root of both, plus or minus the square root of -4. Okay. Anytime you have the square root of a negative number, we're going to take the I out. We're going to shoot the I out. How many people have watched The Christmas Story? You'll shoot your eye out, right? That's what we're doing. We're shooting our eye out. You'll shoot your eye out. You'll shoot your eye out, right? We're taking the I out. So we're going to do plus or minus I times the square root of 4. So notice it's not negative anymore. I took the I out.
Which is the negative.
That's the negative, yes.
That's
Because, so I'm trying to simplify it. Sometimes when I try to simplify, I make it more complicated. This is actually the square root of negative 1 times 4. That's how we get negative 4, right? And what's the square root of negative 1? Square root of negative 1, I, yes. That's where the I comes from. This comes out as I. Okay, so now we can go further. This is plus or minus, what's the square root of 4? 2, plus or minus 2I. So it's the same thing as just taking the square root of 4, except that we have to stick that I on there. Okay, so what do you think the square root of negative 36 is? Plus or minus 6I. Okay. What about the square root of negative 98?
What goes in 98?
Isn't it like 12?
No,
No, it's not 12. It's 14.
you know,
Is it even?
No,
4.
it was.
Yeah, it's even.
2 times
4.
49.
2 times 49. Okay. So
Or 7.
what's this going to equal? Plus or minus? We're going to take the 7, right? Square root of 49 is 7. How about that negative sign? I. And then I'm left with a 2 inside. Square root of 2.
You just leave the I out.
Yes.
Should we? Okay, I see.
We shot our eye out.
Uh,
Okay. So this should be written 7 square root of 2. The I should be on the end. Right? The I should be on the end. Okay. How about this one?
Well, why should it be on the end?
It's just the proper format. Just like if we wrote 3x, the x should come after the 3 instead of x3. Okay. It's just the proper format. How about the square root of negative 300?
10 and 30.
10 and 30, there's an easier way. 3 and 100, because 100 is a perfect square. So what's that going to equal? Plus or minus? Okay, and now let's just put it in the correct order. Plus or minus 10 root 3 I.
Oh, it has to go at the end.
Mm-hmm.
Has to.
Has to. Yes,
How come it goes on the outside?
because that's the form. That's the proper form. We haven't learned yet about what we call complex numbers. When we do, that'll make more sense.
Okay.
For now, you're just going to have to trust me that that's the proper way. Okay? Okay, so let's say that we have the equation 4x squared plus 25 equals 0. Let's solve that equation.
I have a question.
Yes,
So it doesn't matter if it's positive or negative?
yes.
So what if it's positive?
Then you just take the square root like we did on last night's homework.
Feels like a Friday.
So
It's
what,
not a good Friday though.
what do we do? Good. Divide by 4. Now I have a negative number here.
How'd you get the negative?
I subtracted 25 from both sides.
Why? There's 0.
I subtracted 25 from both sides.
But there's no B, bro.
I subtracted.
Yeah.
Square root both sides. X is equal to plus or minus the square root of negative 25 over 4. Okay, what's that going to equal?
5 over 2, 5. I.
Square root of 25 is 5. The square root of 4 is 2.
Yeah.
And I have a negative, so I have to put an I there. Okay.
Miss Mary, this is giving me a headache.
Yeah, it's giving me a headache too. My brain hurts. My eyes hurt.
It's. Don't get me wrong, this is fun and all.
How about 3x squared minus 10 equals negative 27. Let me make that easier. Make that a 37. What do we do first?
Add 10, so it's
Add 10. Good. 3x squared equals what? Excellent. And then?
divide 3.
Good. So we get negative 27 divided by 3 is negative 9. Square root both sides.
Oh wait, no, yeah. Oh wait, no, it's negative, it's 3.
So x equals plus or minus 3i. There you go. Da-da-da-da-da. Okay, there is a short assignment in Delta Math for you to work on. Yes, sir? Mm-hmm. Okay, you remember when we're multiplying exponents, right? If we have x to the third times x to the fifth, what does that equal?
I'm sorry, what?
Good, right? We add the exponents, right? X to the second times x to the third times x to the fifth, what does that equal? Good. So it's the same thing with I. Okay.
Oh,